Okay, take two. Take two is not good, is it? Take three. Hey, how are you? How's your week going? Is it a weak week or a strong week? Is it a silly week? Great to see you. You're so smart to be here today. You always pick good concerts. They're all good. And so today, we have Maestro John Mendel playing guitars. He is such a scholar. He is such an artist. And when I think of John Mendel, I think of a person who might enjoy some time travel backwards. And so today we're going to go backwards to the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and see how they lived back then. It wasn't easy, I'm sure, for most people. There are always a few privileged people, aren't there, though? The nobility, the rich people, the pirates were probably pretty well off. However, the people who did all the work in the farming and so forth probably didn't know much about the music you're going to hear today, because that was for the privileged people, the nobility. And a lot of the people who wrote the music that you're going to hear today and that you do hear were working for nobility. That's the only way you could get funded if you were an artist. Otherwise, you played at home and you probably weren't very well educated. So today we get to hear what the kings and queens and nobility heard. Music by 4 different composers spanning a period of 1500 to 1700, 1750, 1800 actually. We even have a composer here I see whose dates are almost identical to J.S. Bach, and he also lived in a German city, which makes me wonder, I wonder if he knew Bach. And Mendel is going to talk about that. So there's an echo in the present, not the past. So anyway, that's John Mendel, and I love his ability to transport himself and you and me back a few hundred years. So let's give him a fine, warm welcome and enjoy his concert.
Testing, testing. Okay. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Brad, for that introduction. It's an honor to play for you all today. That first set was by one of my famous composers that I've discovered in the last few years, named Marco dall'Aquila, who came from the town of Aquila, or L'Aquila, in Italy, in the Abruzzo region, where I actually had the opportunity to spend a week about a year and a half ago. It was really wonderful. And he was from there, but he made his career in Venice. The theme for the program today is Fantasia and dance. And in the case of dall'Aquila, and many composers of his generation, the ricercar, which basically means to search, was the equivalent of a Fantasia form. And the terms were used interchangeably in his lifetime as well. So I paired those with the dances della Traditora and Caracosa. I'm going to play a set of pieces, another set of pieces that fascinates me, imagine that, by Adrien Leroy, who I think is one of the most underplayed composers of the 16th century on lute. The first set would date to around 1530 or so, give or take, the 1530s. This is music published in the 1550s, except for the last two pieces, which were published in England in 1568. So I'm going to play Fantasia and some short dances called branlas, which sort of have a folk music kind of sensibility to them, and then a short prelude and perhaps Leroy's most famous piece, his setting of the Passamezza, which is a piece that's based on a repeating set of chord changes and a repeating bass line. Oh, and this is a Renaissance lute. This is a 6-course lute built by Lawrence K. Brown. The soundboard is spruce. The bowl is maple, which is really pretty. Maple's like my thing. I love maple instruments. And one interesting thing about this is, I've got it strung in the manner of an early 16th century lute player, which is I have octaves on the 6th, 5th, and 4th courses. And particularly, with all these courses, particularly with the 4th, sometimes you're supposed to notice the lower note more, sometimes you're supposed to notice the higher note more. And it's an interesting interpretive decision, sort of which one I aim for when I'm playing to bring out, not that my aim is always true, but at least I have the intention of playing the right note. What else to say about this? This has 11 strings. They're all paired except for the first one, which is single. It's strung at a higher tension. They called it the chanterelle, the one that sings, because it was a little bit stronger than the others. Whoa, hello. love this thing. So the joke about lute players is that we spend half the time tuning and the other half playing out of tune. I spend 60% of the time tuning and 40% playing out of tune. So I just want to double check this. And I actually have a little tuning change after the first piece I play on this massive lute. So thanks in advance for your patience. I'll see you just in 1 minute. I've realized it's impossible to look cool when you're tuning those really far ones on stage. So as I couldn't resist telling you in the middle of Brad's lovely introduction, Weiss and Bach did know each other. They were both highly regarded musicians on their respective instruments in their lifetime, Bach on harpsichord and organ and Weiss on the lute. It's documented that at least once they actually had a friendly competition at improvising fantasias and fugues, Bach on the keyboard and Weiss on the lute, which must have been one of the great musical happenings of all time. You know, I can't even imagine. Weiss's renown was such that he was the highest paid musician at the Dresden court in the 18th century. You can't make this stuff up. A jealous violin player even once tried to bite off his thumb. Look it up. He left behind a huge amount of lute music, mostly solo lute, but also some ensemble music and some concerti. So I'm going to play some music from, there are two big collections of Weiss's music, the London manuscript and the Dresden manuscript. I'm going to play some pieces from the London manuscript. So the first is a piece that's actually really famous as a classical guitar piece that I studied on classical guitar, but I never performed it. Guitarists usually played in E minor, sometimes D minor. On Baroque lute, it's in C minor, and it's amazing. It has its own set of challenges, but the guitar challenges of these insane stretches you have to do with your left hand are gone. Of course, I have to do insane stretches with my right hand, but that's the trade-off. And then I'm going to play some selections from kind of an obscure suite from the end of the London manuscript, probably written in the 1720s or 30s. The fantasy that I'm starting with was written in 1719. Oh, Baroque lute. 13 courses. So the first two courses are single strings. The rest are in pairs, tuned to the same note or in octaves. And you tune those to the scale of the piece that you're playing. So, because my next piece is F major, I have to retune one of them. But it's got 24 strings in total. Historically, they would have used gut strings made from sheep intestine. I use synthetic gut. It is cheaper and it lasts longer, and it stays it stays in tune more, though you wouldn't believe it playing these instruments. And my frets are movable, so you get to tune the frets as well as tuning all the strings, and these are made of actual gut. So if you're curious what gut looks like, you can come and take a morbid peek afterwards.
Old tuning peg technology.
So this is a guitar from the Petit Jean workshop in Mirecourt, France. It was built around 200 years ago. This is circa 1830. It could be anywhere between 1820 and 1835. Its most striking feature visually is the mother-of-pearl floral inlays around the soundboard and the sound hole. Doesn't have a separate fingerboard, so the highest frets just extend up onto the body. The back is bird's eye maple, and that's actually a veneer. So the soundboard and the wood that the sound is reflecting off of internally in the back of the guitar are both made of spruce, which is very interesting. That was a very common thing in the 19th century. I found this guitar one winter break when we were visiting my wife Carrie's family in Toronto, hanging on the wall in a guitar shop in Toronto, Canada. Not as functional as it is today, but I bought it, went through quite an ordeal to get it shipped into the country, and we're lucky to have Alan Perlman in San Francisco, who's a genius luthier who got it into working shape for me. So it's been quite the adventure with this guitar. Just want to, before I play my last piece, thank you all so much for coming out today. Thanks to the Westminster Presbyterian Church and to Brad for hosting this concert. I want to acknowledge my first teacher, Matthew Grasso, who's in the audience today. Now, I'm not sure if it's more important that I thank you or apologize for this mess, but so I'm going to play a piece by Dionisio Aguado, who originally came from Spain, as you may have surmised, but made his career in Paris, which was one of the hot spots for guitar in the 19th century. But this is probably his most Spanish-sounding piece, Introduction and Fandango. So I figured it would be appropriate to end with a lively Spanish dance, given the theme of today's concert, and the introduction feels like a fantasia to me, so we'll pretend that it is. So thanks again, and I hope you enjoy. I gotta play this piece in like a week anyways, so let's see if I remember it. Valentine's Day is coming up, so I'm gonna play La Rose, The Rose by Mauro Giuliani.
John, we want to talk with you and about you. You did it again. Yeah, you charmed us. No sorries about that. Amazing, really, it's amazing. Matt Grasso, great to have you here. Thank you for being his first teacher. And Carrie, you're the #1 support system. Stand up. This is John's wife.
A wonderful musician in her own right. We met in grad school for classical guitar.
And now, the program, John, for me, probably for you too, ideal. You really went all over Europe, didn't you?
I did.
We went to Italy, we went to France, we went to Germany, and Spanish connected to France a little bit there. And then for me as a keyboard player and knowing some of Bach's suites for keyboard, getting a chance to hear Weiss, do we call him Weiss, not Weiss, right? We're doing Weiss. His suite, and the fact that their birth and death dates lie almost exactly the same, to hear the movements of what he calls a sonata, but we would usually think of as a suite, but maybe not so, because it's not sonata form, so that's...
He called them sonatas, just like the Bach violin sonatas and partitas. The partitas are dance suites.
Well, the word sonata has kind of changed in its meaning, hasn't it? Yeah. But to hear those forms, which are very recognizable, even though the notes in those forms are changed around a little bit from what we're used to, I'd say Weiss has nothing over Bach. But Weiss was fine. You could tell that Weiss was a very high-minded musician and composer. And I'm sure that Bach, I'm thinking, did one learn anything from the other, you know? Weiss was more published, wasn't he? Or at least he wrote more, didn't he?
He was probably more famous in his lifetime. Bach was a crazy old man who did things that people didn't understand sometimes. Now we think they're great.
So Weiss was a little more for the normal ear at that time, and Bach was kind of OCD, you might say. So fascinating program, really, and thank you so much. And then he remembers you for Valentine's Day. I mean, that's John Mendel for you. So remember, we pay by the note, okay? You didn't remember that. All of the above. Oh, and also I want to just say one more thing. It was fascinating to hear the older instruments, the lutes, and then to hear the guitar, because wasn't there a distinct change in tone? I describe the lutes as more nasal sounding, and the guitar was more full-bodied, the sound that we're used to hearing. And I must say, I'm probably more in favor of the guitar just because I like the broader sound and less of the nasal sound. Although the nasal sound may have appealed to the French. They tend to like that thing. They speak that way, and some of their instruments are a little brighter, aren't they?
I think that's it. That sounds like a PhD thesis.
Well, I only have a bachelor's, so I don't think it is. So, anyway, great to see your historical instrument there, and we're probably curious to know more about it, but we don't have time now. But thank you very much for coming, and one more last applause. Thanks for being a great audience for John. He deserves a full house for sure. Next week, Dave Bass Trio. Have you heard of him before? Have you? Am I pronouncing it correctly? It's bass, right? It's not bass, right? Dave Bass? Have that right. He's here next week, and he's going to entertain you royally. Hope to see you then. Have a great week.
Yeah, that's true. And I missed things in the rest of the was talking. Are these just sympathetic strings?
Yeah.
I think so, yes. The other girl too, the tears. Let's.
I guess it is. But it's just because it's like